This week, we're sniffing, dripping, and clipping. If you know what that means, please let us know because I have no idea. We will be talking about how a politician's kids accessed his laptop through facial recognition, critical flaws in WordPress and Qualcomm even chipsets. 2 million IoT security cameras and baby monitors are vulnerable, go figure, and how a new Emotet variant uses connected devices to proxy C2 servers. In the expert commentary, the return of Jason Wood from Paladin Security joins us to talk about how Microsoft is telling IT admins to nix obsolete password reset practices. All that and more on this episode of Hack Naked News.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show that brings you the security news each week. And despite popular belief, we do wear pants. It's Hack Naked News. Let the team at Black Hills Information Security test your defenses. With over 10 years of experience in penetration testing, red teaming, and threat hunting, the testers at Black Hills will help you find the holes in your security before the bad guys do. The team at Black Hills cares about educating and sharing their knowledge by creating countless blogs, open source tools, and webcasts for you to learn more about the tradecraft of pen testing and red teaming. Visit securityweekly.com/BHIS to join their mailing list and view the latest blogs and webcasts from Black Hills Information Security. Welcome, everyone, to Hack Naked News. This is episode 216 for April 30th, 2019. I am your host, Paul Asadorian. Some of you have told us that you're overwhelmed by the amount of content that we distribute here at Security Weekly. In an attempt to make it a little easier for you to find out what you're interested in, we've created a new listener interest list. You can sign up by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe, clicking the button to join the list. Also, if you would like to submit a guest suggestion, you can go to securityweekly.com/guests and suggest people to be on the show. Please do that, as it's really awesome because we want to interview people that our audience wants to hear from. So how about that? And you're probably sick of hearing my voice. Register for our upcoming webcast with Observe It even. It's like an easy name to say. And Kaseya, you can go to securityweekly.com/webcast. Please register for those. They're going to be awesome. And if you missed a webcast, you can also go there and find them on demand. And now, the security news for this week. Facial recognition fail allows politicians' kids to access his laptops. With new elections for Europe just around the corner, Matt Carthy can't be the only politician liberally distributing photographs of his smiling face through the letterboxes of potential voters. But in Carthy's case, it wasn't a stranger that was able to subvert facial recognition on his HP laptop, but it was his kids. So they're wondering why, he was wondering why his battery was running so low on his laptop every time he left it at home. Turns out his kids used the election leaflets to get through the facial recognition lock. He wasn't sure whether to be proud or concerned. I would be proud, my friend, because I love it when my kids hack my stuff, provided they don't break stuff. But in any case. A critically unpatched flaw has been disclosed in WordPress's WooCommerce extension. The vulnerability in question is an arbitrary file upload that can be exploited by unauthenticated remote attackers if the vulnerable sites have categorize uploaded files option turned on within the WooCommerce Checkout Manager plugin settings. A quote from the article says, from the more technical aspect, the vulnerability occurs inside of includes/admin.php file at line 2084, on which the application is moving given files to a directory using move file upload without proper checking for allowed files. Explained in a blog post published Thursday by web application security platform WebArcs, who warned their users after the plugin vulnerabilities were made public. I don't believe there is a fix for this one yet, but you can imagine there will be one soon. In the meantime, you could probably just disable that option. Critical flaw in Qualcomm chips exposes sensitive data for Android devices. Researchers have uncovered a new side channel attack that could be exploited by attackers to extract sensitive information from the Qualcomm secure key store, including private keys and passwords. The attack potentially impacts most modern Android devices that use Qualcomm chips, including the popular Snapdragon models 820, 835, 845, and 855. They were using some kind of Nexus Revision 5 device to successfully exploit it in the lab. The attack leverages a flaw in Qualcomm's secure execution environment designed to securely store cryptographic keys on devices. A side channel attack can extract those private keys from I said that already. Recent Android devices include a hardware-backed key store, which developers can use to protect their cryptographic keys with secure hardware. Now, what I find interesting is this attack could be used as many people use their phones for some type of two-factor authentication. I've always wondered what happens when attackers break into the phone and are able to exploit a vulnerability such as this one to gain access to private key stores that could be your second-factor token or the keys to decrypt all of your signal messages on your phone, as some examples. A new Emotet variant uses connected devices as a proxy for C2 servers. Recently, an analysis of Emotet traffic has revealed new samples using different post-infection traffic than previous versions. This report was published by Trend Micro. It's also attempting to use compromised connected devices as a proxy command and control servers that redirect the real Emotet to the real Emotet command and control servers. So this is like a proxy layering type system. The changes may seem trivial at first, but the added complexity in command and control traffic is an attempt, of course, to evade detection. The experts are quoted, they notice the threat actors behind the latest Emotet campaign are actively attempting to compromise IoT devices, including, of course, routers, IP cameras, webcams, blah, 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 all in the first layer of the C2 infrastructure. ISC has patched 3 vulnerabilities in Bind. The first one is the highest severity. CVE 2018-5743 addresses a flaw that does not limit the number of TCP clients that can be connected at any given time. The scenario can be created because of the number of TCP connections is changeable, and if unset, is designed to default to a conservative value for the server. However, the code, which was intended to limit the number of simultaneous connections, contains an error which could be exploited to grow the number of simultaneous connections beyond this limit, creating a denial of service condition. Oops. There are some other flaws in there too, and you'll notice updates coming down from to your various operating systems. I noticed some for the Bind clients on Linux systems as well, which was kind of interesting. 2 million IoT security cameras and baby monitors are vulnerable to takeover. This is like news every week, but I put it in here nonetheless, so be excited about it. Over 2 million vulnerable devices have been identified on the internet, including those distributed by HiChip, Tenvis, SV3C, VStar Cam, Wanscam, Neo Cool Cam, and a host of other ones that I don't recognize. According to security researchers, affected devices use a component called iLink P2P. Unfortunately, iLink P2P is used by hundreds of other brands as well, making identification of vulnerable devices difficult. The first iLink P2P bug is an enumeration vulnerability, CVE 2019-11219, which enables attackers to discover exploitable devices that are online. The second is an authentication vulnerability, CVE 2019-11220, that allows remote attackers to intercept user-to-device traffic in clear text, including video streams and device credentials. Researchers explore remote code injection on macOS. Now, this isn't a published vulnerability. This is a new way to basically hook processes on macOS devices. One could be said that the Weinberg's report, he's an expert in hooking, hooks. The Weinberg's report digs into 3 separate, sparsely documented tactics to hook functions on remote processes, as well as the new custom loader designed by Deep Instinct research team to achieve code execution. The 3 tactics outlined in the paper exploit the Mach 0 format. To do this, there is no vulnerability, although he adds these methods abuse the way it's built to work. Weinberg uses, as an example, the hook inject as a term to group these tactics, which are based on remote processes hooking, but were used to achieve code execution in remote processes. The first described was initially published in a Facebook project called Fishhook, where it was only used for hooking functions in local processes. Researchers found a way to modify the method for code execution. Oh dear, there's a Huawei enterprise router backdoor, but turns out it was just Telnet. Or I guess not just Telnet, but it was Telnet. The Bloomberg Financial Newswire reported this morning, I don't know if it was this morning or one morning this week, that Vodafone had found vulnerabilities going back years with equipment supplied by Huawei for carriers of the Italian business. Europe's biggest phone company identified hidden backdoors in software that could give Huawei unauthorized access to the carrier's fixed line network in Italy, says Newswire. Unfortunately for Bloomberg's Newswire, Vodafone had a far less alarming explanation for the backdoor. This backdoor that Bloomberg refers to is just, in fact, Telnet, which, of course, if you didn't know, a protocol that is commonly used by many vendors in the industry for performing diagnostic functions. That's a pretty terrible explanation of Telnet. In any case, it would not have been accessible from the internet, said the telco in a statement. Bloomberg, the Register calls out Bloomberg and says Bloomberg is incorrect in saying that this could have given Huawei unauthorized access to the carrier's line network in Italy. We'll take a short break, come back with expert commentary from Jason Wood of Paladin Security. Stay tuned. The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. Welcome back, everyone, to Hack Naked News. I'm here with Jason Wood to talk about password policies. And isn't it more secure to change people's passwords every 30, 60, 90, 120, some arbitrary number of days?
42 days.
42 is the answer.
Current default, I believe. Yeah, that's so there's Microsoft is proposing some changes to their baseline for Windows Security 10, and everybody's favorite control of having to change your password at some arbitrary date has been removed from the Windows 10 baseline. So our coworkers would probably be quite excited to hear about this. We may have hordes of people hanging out at our desks demanding changes. Actually, Microsoft, though, isn't the first organization to propose this. Back in 2017, NIST made changes to special publication 800-63.
Oh, yeah, I love 800-63 is one of my favorites.
Yeah, well, it's everybody's favorite. It's, 9,000 pages long or something like that.
It's fascinating.
Yeah, it puts you right to sleep at night if you're having trouble.
Yes.
So their statement here, though, says verifiers should not require memorized secrets to be changed arbitrarily. Example, periodically. They went on to recommend that using to change to using the term memorized secrets instead of the word passwords. Now, NIST explains this, saying that the reasoning for the old requirements, or the impact of the old requirements, ended up with the not so surprising actions of our colleagues to just adjust their password and not really change it. So password 1 becomes password 2.
Right. And so it's frustration. It's interesting all around, right? Like if you set it to not remember some of your, like just the previous password and only recognize if it's like one digit off, people were having very poor password practices, right? That means I can set password 1 to password 2, uppercase, maybe a special character. I meet the requirements. It's an 8-character password, really easy to crack. And I can just flip back and forth between the two when it's time to change my password. If you start getting really strict about it's remembering the past dozen passwords that the user set, and it's looking for a huge difference, the users get so frustrated that they end up picking a more insecure password, and they want to beat you with a stick, essentially, if you're the IT administrator. Did I summarize that, I think, pretty well?
Yeah, that's pretty good summary of it. I mean, I have definitely, as I've communicated changes in policy that have been promoted from the top down, had definitely taken some heat for some of those requirements. And yeah, I mean, with some of these changes, I mean, I've watched things like winter 2018 exclamation point become spring 2019 exclamation point. Very popular one for password spraying attacks by pen testers, and I can personally attest to its effectiveness in organizations. Works real well. Aaron Margosis, he's a principal consultant for Microsoft. We'll go back to Microsoft. Wrote a blog post on their reasoning for this change. And I'd recommend taking a look at it, because at some point somebody's bound to bring this up on why you should remove password expiration immediately. One line that caught my attention was Margosa states, if a password is never stolen, there's no need to expire it. If you have evidence that a password has been stolen, then you would presumably act immediately rather than wait for password expiration to fix the problem. Now, in principle, that makes sense, except lots of organizations don't have indications that a password got compromised. So relying solely on that doesn't quite make sense to me. I guess maybe if you saw changes in use and stuff like that, but if, patterns where somebody pops up from somewhere unusual, then maybe that would be something you could key off of if you're looking at that, but most folks aren't. So yeah, you'd have to have knowledge of that. Now, one thing that they are adding to this information is they say that really they're recommending that we should move to things like multi-factor authentication and password lists where we're checking for common passwords that are really bad. Like Paul also mentioned, the looking for substantially different passwords rather than just minorly tweaked ones. My only comment on that is that obviously we don't get that support in a vanilla installation of Active Directory. So Microsoft's making these changes, but we don't really have anything built in to allow us to do that. Now, obviously, we could go out and purchase something like they mentioned Azure AD, password protection. There are other solutions out there for this type of stuff, Duo, etc., and add it to your environment. But you're going to have to go back and ask for more money. And I don't know about you guys' experience. Mine has been that this is not always easy. Though if I came in and told them we were getting rid of password expiration, the execs might buy off on that quickly. Who knows?
Getting rid of passwords in maybe not all cases, but the authentication technology that exists today that we've been covering in the past couple of years even is just light years beyond what we had 10, 15, 20 years ago when we came up with the archaic policy of everyone's got to change their password every 30 days. However, as Jason, you're pointing out, your mileage varies depending on your organization's maturity in terms of authentication and where that authentication is. End users are just one thing. Administrators could be another thing. Service account passwords, passwords to devices, things like that. It gets a little tricky. So you have to look at this holistic problem of authentication and authorization as it applies to those various areas in your organization.
Yeah, and that leads into kind of the next thought I had on implementing this is this type of change is going to take years before you see it really taking place, because you're going to have to convince organizations to change their policies, and we've been beating them over the head with changing your password every 60 days or whatever it is for years. So yeah, large organizations are going to resist making the changes because they're just slow to make changes. Requirements and audit frameworks are going to be a problem until those get changed. I mean, it's nice to point back to, NIST and Microsoft's guidance here, but if the audit framework says you must have rotation at this period, you fail that audit item. So you're going to get beat up with that, or we're all going to get beat up with that. honestly, though, in the end, if we're doing things we should be doing with passwords already, multi-factor authentication
Mm-hmm.
and things like that, I don't have a huge problem with the idea of removing the expiration of passwords. It's a pain in the neck, right? I mean, every time you do it, you spend 2 weeks trying to get muscle memory back on how to type your password. But I am concerned about the idea that we've got this advice out here of things changing, and I've had people comment to me and say, I've heard that these practices are no longer recommended, but they don't really know what those are. And so we want to make sure that we're versed in what's being recommended so we can make some, reasonable justification of what we're doing and educate folks on what the standards are, and hopefully be able to point maybe some of our auditors back to some of these things and get them to reevaluate some of the questions they're asking, the standards that they're using to evaluate on.
For end users, Jason, I think many larger organizations have matured in their authentication models to support multi-factor authentication, to support all the new ways to not only detect if an account has been compromised with user behavior analytics, right, but also have some of those more advanced authentication mechanisms. I've seen demos of ones that they generate like a random password like on the fly, right, when you authenticate, so that you don't even have a password. You've just got multiple factors to authenticate with, and the password is not even a factor anymore. So there's great systems out there. It's seeing widespread adoption, especially if you've got like an Okta single sign-on, where one set of credentials gives me access to multiple applications at once. Great strides in there.
Yep.
Where I fear, I don't want people to get the wrong idea about this policy, because what if you've got a set of network devices or servers that are using service accounts? Those still need some level of password protection. If they're not multi-factor and using these other new technologies, you may still have to rotate some of those passwords. And your point to auditors is, when you're auditing a password, it depends on the context, right? It has to be audited within context. And the end users, I think, is where Microsoft is focusing. Lots of great strides there. Still, some of the back end stuff and service accounts, and I mean, Cisco routers. I always had that like one password back in the day that no one could change on everything until we did a complete audit, right? But technology has advanced in those areas too. Radius hopefully is more of a standard, which lets you implement things like certificates or two-factor authentication.
Yeah, and it's important to note that technology around these systems to improve authentication not only have improved in what the functionality and flexibility they offer, but they've improved a lot in the administration as well. I mean, I have managed multi-factor authentication systems in the past, years back, and they were terrible. I mean, it was an awful beast to maintain and keep up and running, whereas now they are a lot easier to deal with. So, yeah, and this is, as Paul, as you mentioned, this is aimed primarily at the end users. This is the Windows 10 security baseline that they're making changes to at this point. Obviously, on the server, we get into other
scenarios,
other questions that we're trying to answer here.
For sure.
So, but anyhow, I'd recommend you taking a look at this. Think about your organization, how you're handling some of this stuff, and seeing where you can make some improvements.
Fantastic. Jason, thank you so much. And thank you, everyone, for listening and watching this edition of Hack Naked News. We'll see you next time.